Another very important genre of art that we'll be looking at this semester is painting and other visual arts, but in this case, painting. And I wanted to share with you two images from Erica Doss's book, our textbook for this semester about 20th century American art. She actually begins at the end of the 19th century and goes through the 20th century. And she presents in there and interprets two different paintings that are directly connected to a discussion we're going to have about traditional female subordination, the idea of the woman as subordinate to men and male patriarchy, and more feminist approaches to female identity in America, represented by second wave 1960s, 1970s feminism. So let's take a look at this first image. It's called Virgin Enthroned. And I'd like to ask you to pause the video for a second and go ahead and read that caption, not the caption, the paragraph from Doss in our textbook. It's from page 9, where she offers her interpretation of this image. So take a minute to read it, because I don't want to read it to you. I just want to sort of comment on it with you. So go ahead, pause the video and read it over and then start again. Okay, so if you're back with me, I'm assuming you've read those sentences. And it's fascinating to me that both of the images we're going to look at focus on the Virgin Mary as sort of the idealized feminine identity. And in this case, it's late 19th century cult of domesticity, ideas of women as the focus of cultural refinement lavished upon them by men. But they are sort of the objects of men to be sort of decorated as adornments and signs of male status and accomplishment. At least that's how Doss reads it. And I think it's consistent with the values of the period and a lot of the other art of the period. So this is 1891. If we jump ahead to a classic example of second wave feminist art from the late 1970s by Yolanda Lopez, Portrait of the Artist as the Virgen of Guadalupe, we get a radically different take. If the previous image celebrates traditional subordination and late 19th century cult of domesticity values, this painting clearly has a radical feminist motif that's reclaiming the Virgin, who's traditionally presented as sort of this passive icon, as a vibrant, active Chicana Latina athlete of the late 70s, a woman who reflects the Chicano Latino cultural revolution that occurred in the United States in the 60s and 70s, the Chicano Latino civil rights movement. So again, take a minute to stop the video and read this paragraph from Doss, almost 200 pages later in her book, and then we'll chat about it a bit more. Okay, so hopefully you read it and you see how Doss breaks down the elements of the image and analyzes how the artist uses them to make assertions about female power, which is an assertion of female equality. It's especially powerful coming from a Latina Chicana context because you have the race piece mixed in with the gender piece. So if the previous painting from 1891, The Virgin Enthroned, embodied traditional domesticity, the cult of domesticity, traditional subordination, here we have a feminist take on a traditional image and that revises it into a very powerful argument for female equality. And this is the kind of artistic response to the tension in American culture that we're going to be visiting throughout the semester. And what's interesting about these pieces is how the first emphasizes motherhood and materialism and status, and the second emphasizes sort of radical empowerment and liberation and freedom and female physical and spiritual power. And it's quite an evolution revolution. And in many ways, it captures the feminist revolution or revolution battle of the 20th century, and the move from women as objects of relational identity, in other words, defined by their relationship with men, to women as human beings with individual, fully realizable potential. And whichever work of art you prefer, whichever value set you prefer, that's not our debate here. What we're interested in is how these paintings reflect these values and how these values are pulling at each other in our culture.